House Bill HCR 2005. The language in this is English language education requirements. And this bill was introduced by Representative FILLMORE. And this is a bill, folks, that I have a lot of problems with. It is extremely popular. People have bought into this, and I wish they hadn't, because it does a great disservice to people who are trying to learn English in the United States. And we'll get into that in just a second. But let me read to you first of all, there is a companion bill that originated in the Senate, which should be HCR 1020. They are identical. This is a common practice that you would have a bill in the House and a bill in the Senate doing the same thing, so to see which one advances and which one doesn't. They both advanced handily. The one in the House, the one that we're discussing right now, HCR 2005, passed in the House almost unanimously, 58-1, and there's one abstention. And that was it. The one in the Senate also passed handily. However, it passed only 23-7. There were 7 Republican senators that voted against it. There's good reason to vote against it. Let me read to you what the summary says about this. It's aimed at overturning Proposition 203 of 2000. Creates a dual immersion for both English speaking and English learning. Folks, this has never worked. Now, let me give you a little history as to what's happening here. Way back prior to the year 2000, there was a lot of problem with English learners in Arizona. And actually, there was a lawsuit. And I forget what lawsuit that was, but kids were not learning English. So there was a proposition, a ballot initiative, and it was Proposition 203 that passed handily, about 67 to something %. And it was Proposition 203, and what that did is that it mandated that students trying to learn English in the United States, that they would be immersed at least 4 hours a day into English only. Now, anybody who knows anything about learning a foreign language in a foreign land knows that the only way to learn that language properly is by immersing yourself into that language. Now, this was a modest requirement. It only required 4 hours a day of English immersion. The rest of the time, you could have Spanish classes. You can speak in Spanish, or it doesn't have to be Spanish. It could be any foreign language.
Any foreign.
But as a practical matter, most of the people who are here learning English are from Hispanic countries. Okay? So now we have Proposition 203. Now, what happened after that is that the requirements of Proposition 203 were never met by the schools. They fought this tooth and nail, and they went on to do other things. Like, for example, back in 2019, I believe it was, they messed with it so that to reduce the amount of immersion in the English, they reduced it from 4 to 2 hours a day. And then in the year 2000, that was last session, again, Representative FILLMORE had a similar, in fact, I think it was the exact same bill last year, and that again passed in the House, well, passed committee, but then it was killed in another committee. So, but they brought it again this time, and it looks like it's going to sail right through. Now, I don't know how many of you actually watched the committee hearing, the Education Committee for this bill. I happen to have a particular interest in this. In case you don't realize it, in case you don't know it, I am the product of having been immersed in English when I came to this country. Okay? Mm-hmm. And aren't you say, well, and you're advocating for that? I mean, your English ain't so hot, but that's beside the point, whatever. we know that the best way to learn an English, learn a foreign language, is to immerse yourself into it. But let me mention a couple of things about this committee hearing. It happened on January 19th, in case any of you want to look at it, because I like to give facts so that people can check my facts, so that it's not just Jose talking. It actually is a fact. So, discussion of HCR 2005, January 19th, Education Committee. Now, this committee hearing lasted about 3 or 4 hours. So this particular bill started, the discussion for this particular bill started at hour 2, minute 24. So 2:24. So if you want to advance to that point so you can hear what they have to say, that's where you would go. Now, if you continue to watch and you get to 2:35, in other words, 2 hours, 35 minutes, the chairman of the committee, Chairman Udall, admits that English learners are not being immersed. She claims that instead they're placed with other kids and they are speaking Spanish. Now, and then she goes on to say, that's why we need to change. So, they're not doing it, but we need to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. It's failing because they're not doing it, but we need to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. And folks, she actually said it with a straight face. Mm-hmm. Okay? Then, if you go to 2-39, in other words, 4 minutes later, Representative John asked how, and this is a good question, how is the current law causing these kids to be lumped in Spanish speaking and not actually being immersed in English? And a guy that is spearheading this, and I don't know what his position is or his qualifications or whatever, his name is something Esposito. Mm-hmm. He went into about a 3-minute double speak. He never answered the question. But I know the answer to that. I mean, everybody knows the answer to that. They just didn't want to do it. They just allowed the kids to be, lumped all together and speak Spanish and have a big party. And they wanted this to fail so that they could get rid of it. And so now we're in a situation where if the vote is any indication, this thing is going to sail right through. It's going to, both bills, and that's another thing. Normally they abandon one bill when you have two bills going together and the one clears the chamber, they get rid of the other one. Okay, mm-hmm. There's no evidence they're going to get rid of one bill. They want to. There's a good possibility they'll send to the governor two bills, one from the Senate and one from the House, that are identical. They want to make absolutely certain that this thing passes. The good thing about it, though, is that it will go to the people, because since it was an initiative or a ballot proposition.
It was a referendum, I think.
Oh, well, it may have been a referendum. Whatever it was voter protected. So the only way that they can get rid of it is to have the voters do it. But the way that they've been acting and the way and the amount of people and the money that's likely to go into this, I would be very surprised if it doesn't, if they don't repeal that proposition, and it will be a great disservice to the kids that are trying to learn English, because anybody who knows anything about having learned a language, there's one thing that's very important. Most people, if you're not familiar with it, you don't know this. In order to be fluent in a language, you have to make a transition. There's a certain hurdle that you have to cross or go over, and that hurdle is thinking in that language. Okay? If I am talking to somebody and they make reference to a pen, and in my mind I have to say, no, that's not a pen, that's a pluma. I have to, the Spanish word for it. Mm-hmm. And then I formulate an answer, and then I have to translate pluma, which would be the Spanish word for it, into pen. Even though that doesn't take very long, it does make it very difficult for me to be fluent in that language. So I have to start thinking in terms that this is not a pluma, that this is a pen. Mm-hmm. Okay? That will never happen if I am doing this in a dual language, because I keep on translating back and forth. Mm-hmm. I have to cross that hurdle. Mm-hmm. These kids will never cross that hurdle if we insist on teaching them in Spanish and English. have said enough. I think next time I'll tell you how I really feel about this bill.
I was going to say, I wasn't aware that, I mean, that you were so emphatic about this bill. I just assumed that, at
I
your
really
age,
shouldn't give a damn.
you already knew how to speak English.
Here's the thing, if all of these Democrats that these Democrats keep on being reelected by substantially Hispanic people, okay? And they keep on pushing this on us, and then the Republicans join them, I am here trying to fight this and saying, you're doing these kids a disservice, you really need, they really need to learn English, and this is not doing it. But they don't want to listen, At some point I have to give up and say, okay, the hell with them, let them have it.
Well, you have to, I don't. No, but I received an email from a friend who has a background in education on this, and she was indicating that these bills are really not a good idea. They're just not a good idea at all. And she went on to point out that in the Tucson Unified School District, that the 4 hours has already been reduced down to 30 minutes. And that as a result of that downgrading, that only 30% of the Spanish language students can pass.
And that's the argument, and that's the argument they're using to say this thing is not working, we have to change it.
Yeah.
And it's not working because they're not doing it.
I understand, but Jose, I mean, I've got a totally different reason for opposing this than do you, I suppose. I mean, maybe it's just a matter of a degree or points or point of view or whatever. But, the purpose of the Department of Education in the state of Arizona or any state is that we are going to hire teachers to teach our students, our children, education, whatever the subject matter may be. Now, when we do that, we make a commitment that we're going to pay those teachers a good living wage, whatever that might be, and we have to determine that. But then their job is to teach those students so that those students can then go out into the great unwashed public, as it were, and be able to live full, productive lives. Now, it doesn't take a really smart individual to know that if you cannot read and write the language in the community in which you live, then you cannot live a full, productive life. You may be able to do that in a community which speaks only the language that you speak, but you can't do it across the borders in everything. And that's what this bill is basically doing. It's taking away all of that information. I do not for the life of me understand why that they want to repeal a code section dealing with definitions. What's the purpose of it? I mean, it only provides definition as to what's a bilingual education, what's an English language. I mean, why repeal that? There's no purpose in repealing that. They also want to repeal 15752. Actually, this bill repeals 5 code sections. And I don't see any reason to repeal any of them. There's no basis for it. Now, if you go to, and the last figure I saw from the National Educators Association is that students in the state of Arizona, 40% of the students graduating from the 12th grade could neither read nor write proficiently at grade level. Now, this is after we passed 203 and mandated that our teachers teach our students how to the subject course matter, and they're just not doing it. So now this bill is going to get away even further from requiring them to teach the subject matter, and it's just not a good idea. Folks, I'm going to tell you again, you don't have to take my opinion, and in my opinion, you don't have to take Jose's opinion. But what I really think you have to do is you really need to read the bills. If you don't read the bills and do some research on this, you'll have no idea exactly what your legislators are doing to you. And to that extent, there is a provision that I saw recently read. And here's something that it pointed out to me. and I didn't realize that it was this severe. It says that 99.9% of Americans have little to no political influence over public policy, public officials, laws, and candidates. 99.9%. Why? Because you don't read the bills and you don't get out and work. All right? Jose and I are here, we're trying to give you some information on these bills. Whether you listen to it or not is up to you. But if you don't get involved, then it's your problem, because you're the one that is allowing your legislation